Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to crisis management, communications, resilience, disasters, anything that can help you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Today, we're going to be talking about crisis communications. And some of you may recognize today's guest. He will be speaking at the upcoming Continuity Resilience Today, and I remember him from seeing him reporting on the TV news. I'd like to welcome today Sean Mallen. Sean, welcome to the show.
Nice to be with you, Alex.
Now, I know a little bit about you, but just in case, because we do have people literally around the globe, could you take a minute or two and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got into what you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was a reporter for more than 30 years, mainly with the Global Television Network here in Canada, the National Television Network. In that time, I covered politics probably more than anything else, but a little bit of everything. So it enabled me to go from coast to coast to coast in Canada on election campaigns, but also natural disasters, stories about the environment, stories about Indigenous issues here in Canada. Also had a couple of really memorable years based in London as the Europe Bureau Chief for Global News, an extraordinary period that started with the royal wedding of Prince William and Catherine Middleton, but carried on through the Olympics, the change of popes, the Costa Concordia disaster, which I speak about in when I do crisis talks, and many, many other fascinating stories. Putin's election, so-called election in 2012 that brought him back to the presidency. I left journalism in 2015 and set up an independent communications consultancy based here in Toronto, and crisis is among my specialties, along with media training, sometimes specialized media training for crisis, presentation training. I do a lot of writing, speech writing, writing of articles, strategic communications as well, and it's been a really interesting blend. And I also give talks about crisis, such as the one you referenced as well, all of which has proved to be a really interesting next chapter in my career.
Well, I'm glad to have you on the show. I'm quite honored to have someone with all your experience and knowledge with us today.
Appreciate you the invitation.
Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to talk about crisis and crisis communications. My first question, though, I want to go off a little script, just a little bit. Is there a difference between crisis management and crisis communications? The reason I'm asking is I recently just saw an article and they were using the terms interchangeably. And I don't think that's quite correct, but
Well,
to hear your thought on it.
I'd say they're intertwined, but not necessarily exactly the same thing. Crisis management is probably a broader term because certain organizations think power utilities, for example, or municipalities, as unfolding in Florida as we're taping this, with dealing with natural disasters, hurricanes, and that kind of thing. Crisis management, I would say, is a broader term in terms of if a utility has a giant power blackout, such as unfolding in Florida as we speak, the management of that involves far more than crisis communications, involves getting the crews out to get the power restored and that kind of thing. Crisis communications, at least the way I define it, is part of that broader plan because you not only need to get your crews out fixing the power lines, you also have to explain to your ratepayers, your customers, what exactly is going on. So they are intertwined, but not exactly the same thing. I describe crisis communications as a subset of crisis management.
Great, thanks for that. As soon as I read that in the article, I thought I got to ask Sean that, get his opinion on that comment. So let's jump into some of the things that we're going to talk about today. And one of the things that you brought up when we had a chat earlier was reputation. Why is it so important to protect one's reputation, considering today's world has social media and yesteryears, I guess, didn't? but it seems much more important today than it was back then. So why is it?
Well, well, it's always been important. When I do crisis communications talks, I quote Benjamin Franklin, an 18th century man, and I hope I'm quoting him correctly, saying that it takes many good deeds to build a good reputation and only one bad one to ruin it.
Hmm.
And that's a man speaking in the 1700s. So it's always been true. It's just become much more easy and rapid to lose your reputation in the age of social media as well. So crisis communications, a lot of it has to do with what we call reputation management. And by that, I mean it's reputation protection, it's mitigating damage to reputation, or the toughest is repairing reputations that have been damaged, which can be an awfully difficult process to do. When I do talks on crisis communications, I ask the audience right off the bat, what do you think is your most important asset? And you get a variety of responses, but in my view, ultimately it is reputation. Because for me, as an independent communication consultant, if I don't have a good reputation, I get no work. Or if I have something that goes very badly that gets out into public and my reputation is damaged, again, how do I get work? I do work, for example, I did a big training session this past week with real estate agents in the province of Ontario. And as I said to them, when you first hung out your shingle as a real estate agent, people weren't probably knocking on your door to hire you to help them sell their house or help them buy a house. It takes time to build up your reputation, to indicate to people that you are good at what you do, that you can be trusted. And that applies to all different kinds of fields as well. And so crisis, sometimes it's for organizations, the reputations of an organization, sometimes it's the reputation of an individual as well. Once damaged, very hard to repair, but sometimes you can uh, anticipate something that may pose a challenge to your reputation. This gets into another related field, which is called issues management. You know something bad is about to happen, or something that might be controversial is happening. And issues management is all about thinking about, okay, how do we deal with this? How do we roll out this controversial program or make this controversial announcement? And how do we do it in a way that mitigates the potential damage to our reputation as an organization or as an individual? And if it's bungled, then you get into crisis. And that's sort of the next step.
Well, you mentioned three pieces there: protection, mitigation, and repairing. I would understand the repairing part, what you're trying to do there. But what's the protection and the mitigation pieces? Can you explain those two?
If you're rolling out something controversial, say, for example, some years ago, I had to deal with a major uh, multinational firm that was doing a plant shutdown. Plant shutdown is never going to be a happy story. It's always going to be a bad story. It's a multinational organization, and shutting this down, they were concerned, might lead to a consumer boycott of their products in Canada. And and it's a household name organization. And they were worried about that, and they were also worried that about yes, they were worried about potential consumer boycott. Also worried about their reputation in Canada because they were maintaining a presence in Canada, just not making the thing that they made before, and they wanted to make that clear. So the challenge with them was, and they were very receptive and a good client and knew what was the challenge that was in front of them. Challenge was to understand that the headline of the story on the day you announce the plant shutdown is not that, well, we're maintaining a certain presence in Canada. Well, no, that's never going to be the headline. The headline is going to be, you're shutting down this plant and hundreds of people are going to be losing their jobs. So the way we navigated that was to make it clear on a human level that they cared about their employees, that they're going to do everything they could to try to assist them in finding new jobs. So that was one element of the messaging. Another element was just simply saying, this is a tough day for us, relating to people on a human level. And all the interviews
Mm.
that the head of the organization did on that day, she said, this is a tough day for us. Not mitigating anything, not trying to downplay anything. And we're going to do the best we can to take care of our people, but we recognize that this is not good news. And then, as a third key message, a term from communications, was that, and we want you to know that we're not leaving Canada altogether. We're maintaining a meaningful presence here. So the last thing you want to do as an organization that wants to preserve their reputation with this inherently negative story was to be portrayed as cold-hearted, because that's bound to lead to some blowback and people saying, well, I'm not going to buy their product anymore. So you start with the empathetic part. I like to, when I do crisis communications talks and when I craft crisis communications plans or issues management plans for that matter, I'm guided by three essential elements: empathy, transparency, and responsibility. And the empathy part in that particular story was really important to show that, we know this is not great, but we're doing what we can to help these people. So that's an attempt to mitigate the damage. You're going to take a hit. You have to be realistic. People are not going to like you shutting down the plant. People are not going to like losing their jobs. But if you can try to approach it on a human level, you can perhaps lessen the damage. That empathetic part is really important.
It's like putting the people, how someone I talked to a while ago said, you put a people spin on it rather than a financial or any other kind of spin, make it people focused.
You start with the human impact. Anytime you cover a crisis, whether it be a hurricane or a plane crash or a plant layoff, the reporter's always going to start with the human impact. Reporters covering a hurricane or a tornado or flood or natural disaster, they will almost always lead off, or at the heart of their story will be how it affects human beings. And a plant layoff story, and I did a few of them as a reporter, you're always going to start with, at the plant gate, talking to people coming out, how do you feel about this? So the economic part can come into it. In the case of this plant shutdown, we also wanted to be truthful that, look, the reason we're shutting this plant down is because we're just not selling enough of our product anymore. There's no other reason than that. And so you should try to be truthful as much as possible there, because again, you can look cold-hearted that, oh, we're shutting this plant down because we're sending the jobs off to Mexico or the Southern United States where people will work for less money. You try to be truthful in that case. That client had a story to tell. And the story was, we're really sorry we have to do this, but the economics are the economics, and we're going to do the best we can to take care of our people.
Is it harder to do today, considering we mentioned social media? Because as soon as you, even if you are being heartfelt, you're being empathetic and transparent, as soon as you say something, there's all these other messages that'll fly around. Like, know that, what Sean just said is BS, right. It's all this and that. Is it harder to get your message across today?
Yes, social media has complicated everything. The decimation of traditional media has complicated everything. So you do a posting on X, formerly Twitter, and no matter what you say, if you're a public figure, you're going to get the most awful things said about you in the comments. And they're from people who don't necessarily read newspapers or see the evening news where the spokesperson is saying this is a tough day for us. Instead, they might be seeing all the chatter on Twitter X, or to some extent on Facebook. So yeah, it's changed everything, but you still have to be part of the conversation with your side of the story.
And so how do you deal with your side of the story if it's out of control, so to speak? Your message is completely lost, and all these armchair spokespeople
Keyboard
are,
warriors, keyboard warriors.
yeah, keyboard warriors, yeah.
Yeah, what I usually advise clients is not to get into debates on X or social media in general, because they are wormholes that never end. These people just want, the people who are the keyboard warriors, who are not listening to facts, seeing this in the American election as we speak. They don't care about the facts. You don't respond to them directly. You put out your own statements saying, here's the truth, here's where we stand. And you don't get drawn into these wormholes with individuals. because there's nothing you can do about them. You can't control it. The best you can do is tell your story the best you can.
Even if they're wild and bizarre, like some of the stuff we read right now is just so far-fetched. Do you just laugh at it and stay on point message, like you say?
It's yeah. The answer is it depends. It depends on how much a certain lie, for example, might get currency. I mean, as we speak, there's a lie being circulated that's by the Trump campaign, for example, and you can look forward to getting a lot of nasty social media responses if I mention the word Trump, that he's lying. But he was lying about President Biden not getting in touch with governors during the hurricane. Hurricane Helene, and previously, and the one we're dealing with at the moment, Hurricane Milton. It's a flat out lie. And because it happened to be Donald Trump and was amplified by his supporters, the president, the vice president, Harris, had to respond and say, this is just false. And you saw even some Republicans responding, saying it's just false. It's sadly, given the world we're in, many people still don't accept the truth. They have their own versions of lies. So if it's that high profile, or if it's a lie that's getting a lot of currency, which sometimes happens when things go viral on social media, you do have to put out a response. You don't respond directly to the main purveyor of the lie or purveyors of the lies. You put it in your own statement saying, well, some people are saying X, but that's false, and here's the truth. Again, you'll get a deluge of people accusing you of the most horrible things. But so what I say to
have a
clients
delete
is,
key.
what I say to clients is, if you have to monitor social media, of course, and see if some particular lie is really gaining currency, then you may have to respond to it. But if it's some guy with 5 followers, Dave 365201, who might be a bot, let it sit. Don't stir the pot anymore. It's only when it boils up to a certain level and you have to make a judgment call on that you are going to have to respond with your own statement, to trying your best to knock down the lies. There was an MIT Media Lab study from 2018 that said that 80% of the postings on Twitter, or no, sorry, lies got 80% more currency on Twitter than the truth. And that's when it was Twitter, and that was 2018. That was long before Elon Musk took it over, turned it into X, and it's become just immeasurably worse in terms of people pushing lies and misinformation.
Right. On that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. Today, we are talking with Sean Mallen about crisis communications, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.